So here we need the sum to n of an arithmetic series, which is n over 2 times 2a plus n minus 1d. We could use the alternative form, n over 2 times a plus l, where a is the first term and l is the last term. But here we're not given the last term, so we won't use that one. We will use the first one, the more common one to use. So we want s of 48 and s of 36. Start by writing them down just with n equals 48 substituted in and n equals 36 substituted in. This is where you get your first marks on your questions. So don't worry about trying to simplify to start with. Just straightforward, write down the formula, plug in the value of n, then you could simplify each of them. Now we can use the information given that the sum of the first 48 terms is 4 times the sum of the first 36 terms. So writing that as an equation and then plugging in what we've found for S48 and S36. Now it looks like it might be a bit tricky here because we're going to just have a single equation with two unknowns, A and D. And normally we're given enough information to work out what A and D are. We're here with one equation and two unknowns. We haven't. So let's just keep going with what we've got and maybe try and simplify it a little further. So looking at that, I can divide both sides by 24. And that's about as far as I can go with that information and sort of get a little bit stuck in that I don't know what A is or D is. But if we then try and work back from the other direction, I want to find the sum of the first 30 terms. So let's see what that gives me. Plugging 30 into the formula gives this, and simplifying gives this version. So that's the most simplified I've got for sum to 30. And over here I've got a value for A which I could plug in. What's quite nice to see here is if you had sort of added this step here as we're simplifying, I can see here that 2A is equal to minus 29D. So that's quite a nice one to just substitute straight in. And I would get minus 29D plus 29D in that bracket, which is really helpful because then we get the result S of 30 is 15 times 0, which is 0. On the next slide I've included the mark scheme and you can see where the marks are allocated. So pause this to check out the mark scheme. Note that the marks here are for a very straightforward, just plug in 48 or 36 into that formula. So don't worry to start off with. If you were to make a mistake on 48 divided by 2, you would not get that mark. Whereas if you just write it straight in directly, you'll pick up those method marks.